I don't exactly like admitting this, but with Ohio State going and getting Bill O'Brien, Quinshon Judkins, Caleb Downs, they've widened the gap between themselves and Penn State.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That is right, Penn State fans. You are Locked On Nittany Lions. Thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Zach Seyko, bringing you all things Penn State sports related, from everything to football, men's basketball, wrestling, men's hockey, you name it. Recruiting, it is on this show. Joined once again by a special guest, Jason Lord. Worked back together with him at ESPN Radio State College. He's a staple when it comes to Central Pennsylvania high school football coverage. Jason, thanks so much again for the time. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, the official sports book of Locked On. And right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. So win or lose, you get those bonus bets. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. And if you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And like I said, if you want to keep up with everything when it comes to Penn State sports analysis for all your favorites, it's right here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Okay, Jason, the gap between Penn State and Ohio State has been a debate over the past, since James Franklin made that comment of we can't just be great, we got to be elite, referencing again that game against Ohio State, specifically the Buckeyes, in the heat of the moment. And now with the transfer portal moves, now with the offensive coordinator move, now with the I don't know that they're buying. I guess they are. I guess they are with this all-out attack with NIL dollars. Ohio State's going all in. They got tired of losing to Michigan 3 times in a row, so they went all in to try to make sure that they can win a national title next season with Ryan Day. I mean, it gets a little interesting here because you bring in. I think the Bill O'Brien hire is very strategic. I think it's very good. You take play calling duties away from Ryan Day, so you just allow him to focus, let him focus and be the head coach, be the CEO. You allow Bill O'Brien to then be the head coach of the offense. So the same way that James Franklin preaches about running his system, Ohio State's adopting that. You just kind of deviate responsibilities away from people that maybe it was a little too much a season ago. Like I said, a little too much with Brian Hartline in his first season as the co-offensive coordinator. So with all, and then you get Quinshon Judkins, you get Will Howard, you get Julian Sayin, you get 2 quarterbacks in the transfer portal, and let's not forget about Caleb Downs, the safety of Alabama. So Ohio State, before any of those moves happened, I had them as the favorite to win the Big Ten because of what they were just normally returning. And then they went and did all of that. So I have to be honest and say that Penn State is the gap has furthered between the Buckeyes and the Nittany Lions.
And it felt like in the Cotton Bowl, the gap was getting closer. It really did when you looked at that Cotton Bowl game. Now, granted, again, it's an exhibition game. I understand that. A lot of guys didn't play in that game that are going to be on Ohio State next year, not only those that left, like Marvin Harrison Jr. But I think you're right. I think it has grown a little bit, and you hit it on the head earlier. I think it's the Michigan effect. I think it's the desire to be national champions, but Michigan obviously is going to take a big step back next year. Whether Harbaugh, we'll talk about it later, I'm sure whether Harbaugh stays or goes, they still have a lot to worry about with all the guys they've lost. But yeah, I think that's a big part of it. I think you've lost to Michigan 3 straight years now. And Ryan Day is under scrutiny as well because of his record against top 10 opponents. You know, we've seen this in Happy Valley, but I think you now see it at Ohio State with Ryan Day against top 10 opponents and Ryan Day against Michigan. The last 3 years, his record has not been good. So I think what Ohio State was able to do in the portal, and I give credit to what they did as a department. I think Gene Smith obviously sat back and said, okay, what's NIL going to do? You know, what is going to be the structure? And we still don't know that. We still don't know the stability. We don't know any of that kind of stuff, but now he sits back and sees, okay, here's how Washington got to the national title game. They went into the portal and got a quarterback. Here's how Oregon was on the cusp of the college football playoff. They went into the portal and got a quarterback. So I think now you're seeing college football evolve now to the point where you've always had the portal. You've always had NIL in these last couple of years where it's gotten extreme, it's gotten to be a big business, and it's gotten to be free agency. How that free agency was working was, I think, more so where the Penn State approach, okay, we need a position here, we need a guy at this position here, plug him in. Now it's basically, hey, I'm going to go out and get the top talent too. And I think now the approach is a little bit different. And Ohio State wasn't doing that for a couple of years, and now they are, because I think a big part of that is their record against top 10 teams in the last couple of years. Their record against Michigan, obviously, being 0-3. Obviously, what happened at Michigan happened at Michigan. Who knows what's going to happen to those victories down the stretch? I get that, but right now on the field, they lost those 3 games. And the gap, I think, has grown a little bit. And am I saying it's going to be this far apart when it comes to August 31st? I don't know about that. I think there's a chance it won't be, but Ohio State added a lot of talent, and really a lot of talent at positions aside from quarterback. They needed a quarterback. I don't think Devin Brown was the answer. I'm not even sure Devin Brown's going to be on that roster come spring. Yeah. So I think that's but I do think they plugged in a lot of positions where they were strong already. Downs is going to be a great safety. Great in that secondary. They already had a great secondary. Judkins is going to be one of the better running backs in the country. They already had a great running back when Henderson is healthy.
Travion Henderson.
Yeah, he's real good. So, and then obviously at wide receiver, you lose the best receiver in the country, one of the top players in the country, yes, but you still have guys like Ibuka there, and you have guys now that are getting ready to step in. So I think
Arnell Tate, Jeremiah Smith.
Absolutely. These guys are now getting ready to step in. They have a lot of starters coming back. I think 8 of them on defense. Swear's coming back. JTT's coming back. This defense is phenomenal. So I think right now the gap is big. I don't think I wouldn't say it's enormous, but I'd say the gap has grown a little bit.
Well, there's levels to it.
Yeah,
there's levels to it. Ohio State's in that top one, or I would say Oregon's right underneath there.
Right.
And then Penn State and whoever else. I mean, again, we're going to discuss what Michigan's going to have to go through here throughout the offseason. We can't predict that at this current moment, but we can speculate. But you mentioned Devin Brown not being the answer at quarterback here. I don't know.
I don't think he was.
I don't know that. I don't know that Will Howard is. Are we so certain that Will Howard is that much? Because you mentioned Devin Brown. What about Kyle McCord? Ohio State allegedly pushed Kyle McCord into the transfer portal. And you mean to tell me that Will Howard is going to come in and be immensely that much better than Kyle McCord or Devin Brown? We saw it in the bowl game that this is why McCord started over Devin Brown. But Kyle McCord wasn't awful. And I would argue that him being the starting quarterback a season ago, him having the experience already at Ohio State gives him a leg up on Will Howard coming in, even though they did make the change at OC with Bill O'Brien.
Yeah, and I think that's a massive change. I think O'Brien, his pedigree is in his development speaks for itself at offensive coordinator. And we'll get into him, obviously. But I think at quarterback, you're right. I don't know what Howard is going to be. He's not a guy that is a wow guy that is going to be the best in the country.
He's a dual threat.
I've seen. He's a dual threat.
Mobile.
I've seen that of him. But now you get behind him, you bring Sayan in there too. You still have Air Howard too. That's another guy that is going to be real good. So
Aaron Nolan, the true freshman. So okay, Jason, you make an excellent point. You make an excellent point. Aaron Nolan and Julian Sayan are both very talented freshman quarterbacks. But Jason, when was the last time we saw a freshman quarterback, a true freshman, first year out of high school, come in and make waves in college football? You need that year to season. I guess other than Trevor Lawrence, and Trevor Lawrence is a generational prospect. But who has done that?
I'll add. I won't stay straight out of high school. I mean, obviously, Michael Vick came out of JUCO, but.
And how long ago was that? How long ago was Michael Vick?
Put Virginia Tech to the national title game. So I think I would say this. I think quarterbacks adapt more to the college game quickly than they do the pros. And that's not taking anything away from what CJ Stroud did this year. That's not taking anything away from what other rookies have done. I just think players adapt a lot quicker, even though they're being away from home, a lot of them for the first time. So I think it's possible. I think you're right. It doesn't happen often, but still, when you have Sayan and Nolan behind these guys, behind Howard, you have now an opportunity where you have depth at a position that was in a big question mark in the in the Cotton Bowl. I'm not sure Brown was the answer. Brown got a couple opportunities, didn't really seize those opportunities. And not that he got a lot of them, but I think to me now you have a very crowded quarterback room. And you're right. I don't know if Howard is going to be the answer. He's going to be the starter, at least as we look at it right now.
Yeah, he's the veteran.
Yeah, he's the veteran. Absolutely. And you have an offensive coordinator in Bill O'Brien that has shown repeatedly he can improve the quarterback position and develop these guys. He showed it at Penn State as head coach with what he did with Christian Hackenberg, what he did with Matt McGloin. I think Bryce Young had the best year of his career in 2021 under Bill O'Brien. And I think he also showed it in the NFL. So I don't think there's anything you can look at with outside looking in where you don't know if these guys are going to improve. I think Bill O'Brien's shown he can improve these guys. And now it becomes a level of trust that, hey, I've brought this guy in, a former head coach, obviously coached Texans, coached Penn State, and an offensive coordinator that was the coordinator to Tom Brady. So, and not to mention was a coordinator under legendary coaches that just stepped aside and were pushed aside in some ways, and Nick Saban and Bill Belichick. So I think you have a guy like him. I think you trust him. You trust that he's going to build a guy like Howard, but you also know that if Howard's not able to do the job, you have that quarterback room behind him that is very deep now. And something that was a huge question mark not even a month ago is now lessened a little bit. Is it still a question? Sure. You don't have
it's stable
necessarily. Yeah, you don't. It's stable. Yeah, you don't necessarily have the proven commodity that's going to win the national title. But I think now the expectation has reached that point where this is national title or bust for Ohio State because of the moves they made as a whole. Where you've spent $10 million in NIL now to build your roster, but I think it's for me, as I'm looking at it, this team is much better now than it was a month ago. And that's one of the biggest goals. Is Penn State better now? Sure. But I don't know if they've gotten better than what Ohio, not necessarily gotten better, but closed the gap in any way with what Ohio State's been able to do in the portal.
Well, and that's why it's a concern here because Ohio State, Penn State, yes, they got Julian Fleming, cast off from Ohio State, and Nolan Rucci. Yeah. But the Buckeyes got Caleb Downs
from the
and Quinshon Judkins. So now I do want to discuss Bill O'Brien a little bit more since he was the former head coach of Penn State. He's familiar with Big Ten football. He won a national title with Alabama, and he's coached in the NFL for a long time. As you mentioned, the pedigree with working with Tom Brady. What kind of difference maker will he be in the first season? That's coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Locked On. The NFL regular season has come to a close, and now we are at the AFC and NFC championship games, and there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed. When you place a $5 bet, it is that simple. It's that easy. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is super easy to use. I use it myself. And there's so many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlays, find bets in the all-new Explore tab, make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays. So your bets are already made for you right there, and there's so much more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. And the Locked On Podcast Network is making history. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you, covering the top sports stories of the day 24/7 with the local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering each and every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Still to come, we're going to discuss Jim Harbaugh's situation at Michigan. Sounds like he might be leaving for the NFL. That is in the final segment. But back to Ohio State, the changes that they've made. They've gone all in. They see a weakness because Michigan is going to be weaker going into the 2024 season. We know this for a fact. It's just a matter of how much of a step back they're taking. Penn State made a good point, Jason. Took a step forward. They got assets. They got things. They checked boxes that they needed to. Julian Fleming was a need. Nolan Rucci was a need. But then Ohio State didn't need an elite caliber running back, and they got one. Quinshon Judkins is an All-America type of running back, even though Penn State contained him. I'm tired of the Ole Miss fans telling me that Quinshon Judkins ran over Penn State. He had 30-plus carries and barely got to 100 yards. 3.1 yards per carry is not a good day. So Penn State held him in check, even though they lost that bowl game. Besides the point now, he's going to have, honestly, a lot more talent around him. And then Caleb Downs already bolsters the number one secondary from a season ago. So for me, it's not so much that Quinshon Judkins joins the offense. That's obviously a really good thing for Ohio State and a really bad thing for Penn State. But Ohio State was the number one pass defense in all of the country, and it really wasn't even close. And now they added the top safety in all of college football currently because Nick Saban solely retired. But then there's Bill O'Brien. And Jason, you can speak a little bit more to this because I'm going to show my age here a little bit. I was still in high school when Bill O'Brien took over as the head coach for a couple of seasons and did very successfully with Matt McGloin and then Christian Hackenberg, respectively, and then used that as a stepping stone to get back into the NFL. And then James Franklin took over. So you know better than I do, but we can all see it that Bill O'Brien, aside from this last season with Mac Jones, has seen relative success with wherever he's been. But I'm so surprised that he came back to college football. I never thought that in a million years that he would land at Ohio State as the offensive coordinator.
No, I'm not entirely surprised. I think he missed it a lot of times. When you talk to Bill O'Brien at times,
okay, better.
I think he did at times when he was in the NFL as a Texans head coach. He missed being back in college football, and he showed that by going back to Alabama and working under Nick Saban. So I'm not entirely shocked. No, I think there's some surprise. Look, his job was up in the air in New England. Was he going to be back? Who knows? Bill Belichick was gone, and I think Robert Kraft was ready to overhaul a lot of things in New England with the year they had. So I think this is a great opportunity for him. So I'm not entirely shocked. I wouldn't say that. But what he brings to the table is a proven commodity without question as a coordinator, as a coach, as a Houston Texans NFL football head coach. I think you can say his decision making was questionable at times. Absolutely. What he did in Happy Valley, I think, obviously he was only here 2 years, but it's not. Sometimes I guess it's not overly fair to get a full read on him. But I will say that. What he did, and along with that class in 2012, with what they were able to do, keeping Penn State football program where it's at right now. I think Penn State is where it's at right now, partly because of what Bill O'Brien and that senior class did, their commitment to that program in 2012. With everything that happened, and I don't need to rehash what happened. I think obviously everybody has their opinion on it, and that's understandable. But I think what Bill O'Brien was able to do when he took that position, massive, colossal shoes to fill. There will never be another Joe Paterno in college football, in my opinion, especially when it comes to Penn State. And so I think that is, and what he did, staying at one program, winning 409 games. But for O'Brien, first year, it was very hard to get a read on him, obviously, because of that. They were facing sanctions. They were under a lot of scrutiny. They, really, I thought he had to essentially coach with one hand tied behind his back because of that. And
the scholarships,
the guys that stuck together. And I thought he did a great job just keeping this program where it was. Second year, I think it got a little testier for sure. But again, just kept the program together, and then obviously left for the NFL, left to go to the Texans. So I don't know how to fully judge his tenure here at Penn State. I always judge it as that. I judge it as a guy that kept the program afloat and kept the program in good shape considering the circumstances that it was under. And now the Penn State, I think, under James Franklin is where it's at, partly because of Bill O'Brien. And I think you could say that. What he's done as a coordinator, I think has been incredible. And there's not many guys, even as a coach, that are going to get fiery and get into the face of Tom Brady, and he did. So I think that's one thing to get a lot of respect for. But also what he did, I think, going to the point I made earlier, I think it was proven how much better he made quarterbacks. Look at just what he did with Hackenberg, what he did with McGloin, what he did with Bryce Young. Now you're going to trust that he's going to do that with Howard at Ohio State, or you're going to trust that he's going to do that with somebody else at Ohio State.
Yeah.
And you believe that he could develop him because he has that proven commodity to develop him. And the other point of it, injuries have been a factor for sure. But even as head coach, Deshaun Watson's not really been the same since Bill O'Brien wasn't a part of him. So I think that's another part where you're looking at the quarterback position. He's done a great job there. He really has. And I think that's where the burden is off of Ryan Day a little bit. It's okay as a head coach sometimes in college football to say, hey, I have too much on my plate, especially now with NIL the way it is, the way recruiting is, the way the portal is. It's changed so much in these last 10 years that it's driven legends out of the game. It's college basketball, Jay Wright, Mike Krzyzewski. I think you probably blame NIL for part of their departure. Nick Saban maybe too. And Dabo's not been the same. He wouldn't admit that at Clemson. But I think for me, as I look at it, it's okay as a head coach to say, hey, I got to relinquish these. And now you're trusting Bill O'Brien, which I think is good trust for Ryan Day.
This is a Penn State show. I think we focused on how this ultimately affects the Buckeyes, but bringing it back to the Penn State Nittany Lions is on game day when Bill O'Brien is on the other sideline for the first time in his return to Beaver Stadium, which is going to be a little strange. It's going to be odd because he came in a very dark period. And essentially it is okay to admit that he saved the program. He did, because it could have been a lot worse. It could have been a death penalty, or Penn State never would have had a Big Ten championship and anything else that James Franklin has been able to do. I'm not saying James Franklin wins because of Bill O'Brien, but you don't have those opportunities to do those things without Bill O'Brien. So now on game day, maybe some other recruiting battles, because as we've seen, Julian Sayin doesn't come in without the addition of Bill O'Brien, because when he was at Alabama, of course, that's how and Julian Sayin was committed to, or was at least in recruiting talks with Alabama while Bill O'Brien was there. Besides the point now, so those prior relationships matter. But on game day, I got to imagine that this is going to be the chess match that we're all going to very much enjoy. And then there's the emotional factor of it. Is Bill O'Brien going to get anything of the I have to prove myself, or is there going to be something lingering with him because he was on the other sideline? He was coaching in blue and white and not the scarlet and gray.
I don't think there's as much emotion for him as there probably was for Larry Johnson Sr. that went to Ohio State and then came back to Penn State.
That's true.
Because you're talking about a guy that really he felt like could have been a head coach in waiting, and now he's still waiting. So I think that this is where so I would say from an emotional standpoint, maybe a little bit, but I don't think so. I think once you're on those sidelines and once you're getting your team ready, I don't think that plays a major role at all. It's a place that you come back to and you say, okay, I remember it here. I won't forget it here. But the other part of it is once that coin flips and once that ball kicks off, your focus is the game. I don't think it's a heavy emotion, but yeah, if you're going to say emotion, I'd say it was more emotional probably for LJ Sr., who, obviously had the kids grow up here and became stars. Larry and Tony playing here, Teresa obviously playing softball. So I think that it's really, for him, was probably more emotional than it was for Bill O'Brien, who was in Happy Valley for 2 years. And look, was it a special part of his life? Sure. Was it a big part for Penn State? Absolutely. But I think for Larry Johnson, who spent a number of years here, I think it was probably more emotional. If you're talking about emotion, I'd put it towards him first when he first came here, after he took the job at Ohio State.
There's always the spring football. After the spring season comes to a close, there's that transfer portal window where, yes, Ohio State can get better, but Penn State can also go find some additions as well. So there's still an opportunity to close that gap. I think the thing that Penn State does have going for it is that you're returning your starting quarterback. You are returning both of your starting running backs. And I know Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins will be a dynamic duo, but there's still that adjustment period here for what it is worth. So there is some light at the end of the tunnel. And this game's in Beaver Stadium. If this was in Columbus going into 2024, different story. However, it's going to be, and I have this one now circled more than ever. I'm eager to see UCLA, USC, Washington. But this new edition of Ohio State with now Bill O'Brien on the sideline almost makes me want to forget about every other game on the schedule. I'm being serious.
Well, I think when you look at the schedule ahead of 2024 with what Penn State has, obviously, I think for me, a lot of those teams are going to take a step back. Washington is certainly going to take a step back. They lose a lot of their starters, and they lose their head coach. USC is going to take a significant step back, in my opinion. I think UCLA is probably a wild card at this point. West Virginia might be a little bit better, and that'll be an emotional game in Morgantown for them, absolutely. I just think Penn State's a better team. So, and now you're eliminating all those. You still have that. Yeah, Wisconsin obviously is. If you could figure out Wisconsin in the last decade, then I need the Powerball numbers to be a multimillionaire because it's hard to tell with what that program has been. But the other thing for me, I think now when you look at their schedule, all those teams I just named, some of them are going to take a step back. Most of them are. Ohio State now has that national championship or bust mentality. And the other part of it, that game's in November. So there's going to be a lot of games before that where you're going to have the chance to iron out a lot of your weaknesses, have the chance to fix a lot of things. It's not an early season matchup. So, that game's circled for me for sure. I think it's going to be a big one. And Ohio State comes here, and you never want to get too excited because anytime, the week leading up to that matchup, you always feel like Penn State is at that level. But, something happens that they're not able to. So we'll see. I think that's the matchup I have circled for sure. Very much looking forward to it, but we're a long way away from it yet. As you said, still moves could be made in the portal. Still could be some freshmen that could wow people in training camp. So who knows? I think it's a number of ways away. And spring football practice, I think, is going to be the big focus here in a couple months for these players and these coaches.
Well, another school that's going to take a step back, and unfortunately, Penn State's not playing them. Go figure. They're the team left off of the schedule. The Michigan Wolverines, with Jim Harbaugh on the cusp of going, apparently is right there, ready to sign with the Los Angeles Chargers. We're going to discuss that move and how it's going to affect the conference and Penn State on the other side. And remember, if you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for all the latest analysis, commentary around your favorite Penn State sports. Truly, football season's come to a close, but we've ramped up coverage of wrestling and men's basketball on the show. I appreciate all the support and helping me build this community around Penn State sports talk. Jason, in this final segment, let's discuss what's going to happen at Michigan. And this will be brief because Penn State, unfortunately, doesn't play the Wolverines while they're down and doesn't get that opportunity to get a little bit of revenge. But it sounds like Jim Harbaugh he's had second interviews with the Atlanta Falcons and the Los Angeles Chargers. One way or another, Jim Harbaugh is going back to the NFL. One way or another, Michigan is going to be without a head coach when all of the dust has settled now. You thought Alabama had to make a coaching change late, but they were able to go and get their guy in Kalen DeBoer. I know there's the rumors of Brian Kelly, and then that leaves LSU empty-handed. And then the transfer portal, people have made a very good point about this. You have the 30-day window where players, if your head coach leaves, you're allowed to enter the portal, and then schools can contact you. But, the transfer portal is closed for everybody else. So this only hurts you twice as much because you lose your head coach. Your players can go into the portal, and then you can't recruit any players to come in and replace them. So Michigan, if they don't, I imagine they're going to promote Sharon Moore. But if Jim Harbaugh actually does leave, and it seems like it's 99% there, they are doomed. And then whenever next school, if they don't promote Sharon Moore and they go get a Brian Kelly, then LSU is doomed. So it's really pick your poison here at this point, just because of the way the transfer portal is set up. You promoting Sharon Moore, he's a good coach. Get Brian Kelly, I don't like him, but he's a good coach for what it's worth. And bottom line is Michigan's going to go through a serious change that's probably going to hold them back for 1 or 2 seasons.
I think very likely. Who knows what the future holds for Michigan outside of what we're talking about too. So, and I think that's got a big that's a big reason why Jim Harbaugh is not going to be the coach of Michigan next year.
Yeah, you could have some serious sanctions if the NCAA is going to lay the lumber.
This is an a la Pete Carroll getting out of Dodge at USC to go take the job with the Seahawks. This is almost very similar to what we're seeing there. I think if Jim Harbaugh, if what did not happen at Michigan and Jim Harbaugh wins a national title, I still think there's a good chance he leaves and goes to the NFL. What's happened at Michigan and what has yet to come down at Michigan all but assures me, at least in my opinion, that Jim Harbaugh will not be the coach of Michigan, that he's going to be going to the NFL. I think the Chargers is probably the likely destination. I think the Falcons have a lot of options right now out there. They're one of the teams really looking hard at Bill Belichick. So I think the Chargers would be the likely destination for Harbaugh. Either way, I think he's back in the NFL, and I think Michigan takes a step back. A lot of guys have already announced they're leaving to go to the NFL. Corum being one, McCarthy another one, Wilson another one. A lot of guys in that offense are leaving. So, so
terrible.
So I think that they're going to take a step back just based on that. But who knows what's going to happen with Michigan? What are the sanctions going to be? What kind of probation will they be on? How many games will they have to forfeit? All of that stuff is up in the air now. And unfortunately, as is the case a lot of times in college sports, the people that are guilty the most are not going to be there when it happens. And that's what happened at USC. And I think it's going to happen at Michigan. I don't think Harbaugh will be there. I think Harbaugh will go to the NFL. And who knows what's going to happen with Michigan after that. But if we're just talking about this year, I think you're right. I think you hit it on the head. I think they'd probably promote more to head coach. I think he's a player's coach. He's a player's coach. He has the respect of his guys, but I still think you lose people to the portal because the expectation now at any of these big schools, and even the ones that are taking steps back, I think Alabama takes a step back this year for sure. But
absolutely,
the expectation is still win your conference, win the national championship, and if that is suddenly a cloud lays over that, then these guys leave. So I think you are going to see people exit Michigan, and I don't know how many players. The other part of it, how many coaches is Jim Harbaugh going to take with him? I think he probably takes a couple. So who knows what the future is going to hold? But if thankfully I'm not a betting man, I'd be more broke than I am. But if I was, I would say, Harbaugh will probably not be the coach of Michigan. I think he'll take a job in the NFL, and I think you're right. I think the Chargers are a very, very likely destination.
And then other than the prestige, the pedigree of it, you're probably going to be paid handsomely. If you're Brian Kelly, who is currently at LSU, why would you want that job? I know he's rumored to take the Michigan job. Why would you want it? Sharon Moore, yes, and he's the glue to hold it all together. He's the only coach that I think you promote, and he's going to be dealt a terrible hand, and he's probably going to get criticized and said, like, oh, Sharon Moore's no good. He couldn't keep it all together. Well, no, duh, because the entire ship is sinking here. Like you mentioned it all. Jim Harbaugh is going to take everything that he can with him and within reason, and then you lose your quarterback. You lose Blake Corum. You're probably going to lose Donovan Edwards. You're losing basically a lot of that offensive line as well, a lot of the defense. And then, as we've seen, even the guys that have enrolled will just enter the transfer portal. Julian Sain was an early enrollee and went into the portal as a freshman with 2 weeks of classes under his belt. The exact same thing could happen for a Jaden Davis, that quarterback that they brought in for Michigan, unless Sharon Moore is able to convince him otherwise. But I'm okay if Michigan becomes one of the worst teams in the Big Ten for the next few years. I'm okay with it.
You're speaking for a lot of people that aren't Michigan fans right now. I think there's no doubt. I think this is where Penn State and Ohio State are coming together and saying, "Oh, hallelujah,
unite!"
Absolutely, and that's. But why would Brian Kelly go to Michigan to answer that question? As of right now, with what sanctions lie ahead, I don't know. But if you're ignoring all of that, Michigan's one of the top desired positions in college football, and it always is. So there is a big reason why a big name is going to end up at Michigan sooner rather than later. It's going to happen, whether it's Brian Kelly, whether it's somebody else. They're going to be able to bring somebody in, and they're going to be able to bring this program back to where it is right now. So I think it's might be an enjoy while it happens moment, but the other part of it, again, just can't say it enough. There's something's going to happen at Michigan. It has to, right? So you're going to have, whether it's just forfeited wins, whatever sanctions come down, whether it's a bowl ban, a playoff ban, I have no idea. But either way, I think that plays a role in why Jim Harbaugh is heading out of town.
Absolutely. And it's always great when the Lord can grace our presence. Jason Lord joining me here on Locked On Nittany Lions to talk more things outside the big picture things when it comes to Penn State football. Jason, thank you so much for the time. Can't wait to have you back on. And I think we brought a good perspective of where Penn State is in comparison to Ohio State and just how far Michigan could fall down. And I'm all for it. But thanks for the time, Jason.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to spring football coming very soon here.